are. Great. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Benjamin Leiva. I'm a third-year PhD student in the Department of Agricultural and Applied Economics in the University of Georgia. What I will be presenting today is the first chapter of my dissertation, which attempts to build a theoretical framework to study the economic importance of energy. My interest in this topic started when I was a freshman in my undergrad studies in economics in Chile. It was a plain economics program in a pretty prestigious school in Latin America. And I came across the ecological crisis first, became very concerned and aware of it, and that basically changed my career path. I didn't change career, but I did started to get very uncomfortable with the models I was being taught. I got this gut feeling that there was something missing. I knew it was the incapacity to interpret the ecological crisis, right? The models were all very nice and efficiency and welfare maximizing, but when I was reading about climate change, deforestation, biodiversity loss, things didn't kind of click very well. But I didn't know what was actually missing until I came to my last year of the program, and I came across reading a ecology textbook. When I came specifically across trophic structures and food chain, it clicked to me. Energy was the protagonist that was missing in all the models I had been taught all these years. And then I started to read, well, what had been done, and I came across Charles' work and Clint's work and Georgescu Rogan's work. But I realized that there wasn't a proper dialogue between mainstream economics and this energetics literature that had been developed trying to understand the role of energy in society and in economics. And so I decided to do my PhD dissertation in an attempt to establish that link. Now, why is that relevant? Sometimes I think it's a lost cause because, well, economists are very, very narrowed down on their way of thinking, and they think energy is not relevant, so whatever. But I still have the idea that economists first are a very big group of people, so having them on board would be very valuable. Second, they're an influential group of people that have access to policy-making positions and to modify public opinion. And third, I still think that some methods used by economists are powerful and would be valuable to bring into this type of analysis that we're concerned about dealing with energy specifically and the ecological crisis in general. Now, the motivation that I am using in this first part of the dissertation, trying to bound this into an academic context, is, well, there is this empirical regularity between embodied energy and prices. That was first documented by Constantin Herendeen. I was pretty excited to meet him, but, well, that didn't work. That was later showed again around 20 years later by Liu et al. And this is for a group of metals. And then it was shown again around 5 years ago by Gutowski et al. For an array of different materials. So there's this empirical regularity between market prices and embodied energy, that is, the total energy required to produce goods. And yet it is very obvious that conventional economics cannot predict this. There's nothing in economic theory that allows us to interpret why that correlation exists. For mainstream economists, energy is not a relevant variable, right? It's not part of Economics 101, it's not part of the most advanced PhD level class, it is just not part of the framework with which economists understand the functioning of the world. And thus, naturally, it cannot interpret this type of evidence, or of empirical regularity at least. Now, to be fair, for energy economists, energy is a relevant variable, but the theoretical approach taken has been to consider energy an input in production and studied using an expanded production framework that considers, apart from capital and labor, which are the typical factors of production, energy and sometimes materials, the so-called CLEM models. That approach has been well recognized in the sense that it has been published in top journals in economics and in energy economic subfields. But it has not been very successful in the sense that the main topics of research have yielded widely inconsistent results. For example, studies on the elasticity of substitution between energy and capital, the causal path between energy and GDP, results are all over the place. But specifically on the correlation that we're focusing on, the study of the cost share of energy in production has been consistently low. That's one of the few consistent results that it has shown. And that implies quite the contrary, that there should be no correlation whatsoever between prices that, on theory, are supposed to reflect costs and embodied energies, given that energy is not a relevant factor in production. And that is why, for mainstream economists, energy is invisibilized in their models, because it's considered that, well, if it's just 5% typically the cost share in production, then it's not relevant, we can omit it, and it's not such a bad emission, right? So the specific questions that I am interested in answering is, well, can we build a formal model that hypothesizes this correlation? That's the first thing, very precise question. Then, can we do it with conventional economic procedures? This is an attempt to be able to dialogue with mainstream economics, to kind of bring it to their field and say, hey, look, with your way of thinking, with your methodology, we can integrate energy analysis, we can interpret this empirical regularity, and perhaps that will allow a conversation that today is largely absent. The ignorance by economists of biophysical economics and ecological economics and energy theories of value and peak oil is daunting. I have been living in that world for several years now, and it is really something that it's invisible to. And finally, as a broad objective is, can we have a better understanding of the specific role that energy plays in economic systems, and how with a model of this nature? As a preview of results, fortunately, it can be done, or at least that's what I'll suggest. A model can be built that first hypothesizes explicitly the proportionality between prices and embodied energy, although it doesn't in a specific form that I'll show later. It shows several things, but as highlights that prime mover accumulation is a prime determinant of short-term growth, while it is the availability of energy, specifically of greater than one energy returns over investment that allow long-term growth. And given that it specifies what and when energy is a key determinant of economic expansion. Now, for this model, there are three concepts that we have to discuss before we can make sense of it. The first one is that goods are material rearrangements. This is a quite unquestionable fact, but that has gone under the radar in economics in general, and I feel also in the discussion in heterodox economics. When we think about any productive process, and here I have the example of cement production, what we're actually looking at is the rearrangement of molecules in raw materials and their reorganization into specific forms that we can recognize as the final output. We take whatever is in the quarry and we modify their molecular composition, we pass it through a system that constantly shifts and rearranges and attaches and deattaches and grinds and et cetera, the molecular composition of raw materials into cement in this case. And then we can take that cement and we mix it up with steel and we arrange a building. Or we take plastics and metals and we arrange a car. Every single good that we are consuming has been taken from raw materials, that is matter that is out there in nature spontaneously. We take it, we rearrange it, and we form it into specific orders or structures that satisfies our desires. Now, the relevance of that recognition comes from the second key concept, that material rearrangements can only be achieved through energy transfers. It doesn't matter what type of energy transfers, because, of course, there are a lot of them, but there is a fundamental principle, which is that if there's any material rearrangement taking place, there is an associated energy transfer that allows it. If there's no energy transfer, there's no material change in nature. And there's no wiggle room in that assertion. That is something that is fantastically ignored by mainstream economists. And for me, it was a wide revelation when I came across this idea. But it was interesting that I commented it with my girlfriend. She's a chemist. And she was like, "What's new, man?" And I was like, wow, I feel so underwhelmed by myself now. Now finally, energy transfer. These energy transfers that are required for material rearrangements can only be done by prime movers, right? And this brings a central variable of interest to the model that I'm going to be talking about. Prime movers are defined as any physical system that can transfer energy. They can be biological, us, we are prime movers, or horses or donkeys, and they can be mechanical, non-biological, as gas turbines, induction motors, diesel engines, or even computers. Any system that can take an energy good, electricity, rice, oil, right, take their energy content and transfer it to rearrange matter and produce goods, that is a prime mover. Now with these three concepts, we're about ready to start with a formal model, but first two assumptions. We always have to put some type of assumptions into the game, even if they're unrealistic. It's just part of model building. The first one is that energy goods provide no utility. This is a simplifying assumption that can be lifted in future more complicated models. I have already started doing that, but it simplifies the exposition, and it's not such a bad assumption when we consider that the bulk of an agent's energy income comes from non-utility yielding energy. So think about oil, right? We get utility from food, but we don't get utility from oil. And oil provides the bulk of our energy income today. The second one is that we'll be talking about an autarkic and single period agent. Autarkic agent is some agent that doesn't exchange with anyone. So everything consumed has to be produced by itself, and everything that it produces, it must be consumed by itself. So it's the idea that Graham discussed by the end of his talk that, well, to start this analysis, we have to start with the big picture. It is more simple. It's a natural starting point to think about the whole system, and then starting from there, we can think about portions of it and how they interact. But in this first exposition, I'll just go with the autarkic agent as a whole. Now, let's assume that this agent has a set of preferences that can be represented with a well-behaved utility function that is strictly increasing in a set of non-energy goods. So in that sense, this is extremely conventional. Extremely conventional. There's nothing new. Novelty comes from the constraint on that consumption, on that utility maximization, which is an energy budget constraint. And that's the point of departure that I am suggesting against conventional economics, that an autarkic agent's constraint is an energy budget constraint. What that is saying is that the average embodied energy of all the non-energy goods that the agent consumes has to be less or equal than the agent's energy surplus. The logic...
What was that last word? Service?
And energy surplus.
Surplus.
Surplus. I'll define that immediately. So the logic of that energy budget constraint comes from the key concepts defined above. If we don't recognize that goods are material arrangements and material arrangements can only take place with energy transfer, right? It doesn't make sense to propose that, well, average embodied energy are crucial in determining the consumption possibilities of agents, okay? Now, if we focus on this energy surplus, we see that, well, this energy surplus is going to be the difference between the energy income provided by energy goods and the total energy transfer required to produce them. So the energy income is energy content times the quantity of each energy good, E, minus the total energy transfer, GE, summed over all energy goods, right? Now, if energy surplus is the constraint on consumption, then naturally, for the agent to maximize utility, it must maximize energy surplus. That's just Pareto efficient. And so we're not saying that energy surplus is valuable per se, but that it is required for utility maximization. So it is the recognition of the material basis of production that allows us to recognize that there is a derived energy surplus maximization objective that is required for utility maximization. Now, focusing on the relation between the quantity produced and the total energy transferred to produce that quantity, we have to talk about prime movers. If we define a set of prime movers by X, then the total energy required to produce whatever quantity of goods is going to be given by omega times X. Right? The G is going to be omega times X, where omega is the total energy transferred by a prime mover. That total energy transfer includes both direct energy transfers. Think about a tractor doing work on a field, right? It's burning oil to rearrange the earth to be able to plant something later, for example. But also indirect energy transfers, which is the embodied energy of the tractor itself, right? The tractor doesn't come to be spontaneously, you have to produce it, and you have to transfer energy to produce it.
Clarifying question, are the X's what are sometimes called activity levels?
No, the X's are quantity of prime movers. So 5 tractors, 10 people,
Okay,
20 computers, right? So
right.
it's a vector,
Yeah.
and each X is a type of prime mover, and they're just quantity, right? So the
Yeah.
omega is the total energy transferred by each unit. So this omega times X is the total energy transferred by all the prime movers.
Got it. Thanks.
Now, this same set of prime movers are going to be able to rearrange matter and produce goods. And the relation between quantity of prime movers that are combined to produce goods and the quantity of good produced are given by a production function, which we assumed also is well behaved, right? So prime movers are in the intersection between an agent's energy transfer capacity and the agent's capacity to produce goods. Now, at any given point in time, an agent has a limited amount of prime movers, right? It has 10 people, 2 tractors, right? You can't have whatever amount you want to produce. And so this energy surplus maximization problem is actually a constraint problem. The first constraint is the prime mover constraint. There are so many people you can employ, so many tractors, so many computers. That's the first one. The second one is a constraint that explicitly takes us away from energy theories of value, as it states that energy surplus is worthless if you cannot use it in the production of utility yielding non-energy. That's what the second constraint is telling us, that the amount of energy surplus has to be useful. And that's why it contains the amount of prime movers you have in the production of non-energy goods times the direct energy they can transfer. As a simple example, if you produce 100 tons of rice, but you have people enough to consume 50, you're going to just waste the other 50. If you don't have enough people to use that energy in the production of utility yielding goods, then it is pointless to produce those 50 extra tons in the first place. If you combine those constraints, set up a Lagrange and take the first order condition, you get this expression that is fairly complicated, but just as a fast review, it contains a measure of prime mover constraint, which I call power constraint. It contains energy goods, energy content, marginal embodied energy. Marginal embodied energy is how much the total energy transfer changes if we change production by 1 unit. And the marginal technical requirements of production function, which is the inverse of the marginal productivity. Now, we can rearrange this pretty nasty expression into this nice one, which tells us that at optimum, the production of energy goods will yield this relation in which energy content of an energy good equals its marginal embodied energy plus marginal energy surplus. Now, marginal energy surplus is another word for net energy, and thus is related to EROI, the energy return on investment, if we divide it by the marginal embodied energy. And so on the left-hand side, we have the marginal EROI, the marginal energy return on investment, that is equal to 1 plus this alpha, which is the marginal energy surplus, over the marginal embodied energy.
Why marginal?
Because it is the marginal embodied energy is how much total energy transfers change when you increase production by 1 unit.
Oh, okay.
Right? So this is what allows us to connect with marginal analysis, which is the mainstay of conventional economics. Right? For a conventional economist, if you're not talking about marginal analysis, you're not talking about economics. Right? So this is a way in which we can include marginal analysis in the type of conversations we want to have here. Now, what is going on? Because algebra is always hard to follow, and graphs are much friendlier always, right? On the x-axis, we have quantity produced. On the y-axis, we have energy. So the MEEC is the marginal embodied energy curve, which shows what's the marginal embodied energy in the production of the good at each level of production. And thus it can vary, right? At low levels, it can be higher than at medium levels, but eventually it will go up. It's the idea that any technical improvements are eventually overwhelmed by the depletion of the resource, right? The idea that zero is eventually downward, it goes down to 1. Well, that's a marginal embodied energy that goes up.
What's S?
What's what?
S?
That's delta, which is the energy content. Right? And the energy content is fixed because it's an intensive property of energy. A barrel of oil has 40 gigajoules, more or less, right, at any level of production. And so at any point in time, the equilibrium condition that I showed before in the equation is going to be represented by this dynamic. Now, what is this showing us? The black line is the demand curve, and it shows that the maximum willingness to transfer energy to produce this good is going to be equal to the energy content up to the point where the amount of energy goods saturates the agent's prime mover capacity. Now, this is hard to follow, but it's the idea that you're going to produce 50 tons of rice if you can use 50 tons of rice. You're not going to produce 100 tons of rice if you can only use 50. Right? So demand falls vertically at the quantity of the energy good that saturates the agent's power rate, the agent's capacity to transfer that energy goods production. And so the intersection between the marginal embodied energy curve and this demand is going to give you the equilibrium point, which is going to be where gamma E is, right? Now, gamma E is going to be less than delta, than the energy constant, and that difference is the marginal energy surplus. The total energy surplus is the dashed space, and that is the amount that the agent can use in the production of non-energy goods. In other words, it is the surplus that the agent produces in the production of energy goods that allow for the production of non-energy goods, such as building pyramids, having universities, or having militaries, or right? It's this idea of two-sector economy, where one sector, which is the energetic one, supports all the other ones that are non-energetic. Now, this is not an intertemporal framework, but if for whatever reason the agent increases its power capacity, the amount of prime movers it has, well, the equilibrium quantity of energy goods is going to increase. The energy surplus is going to be larger, and so utility is going to increase. There are going to be incentives that I cannot make explicit this presentation that are going to lead in the long run to a convergence towards this last point, var theta. That var theta represents the long-run steady state of the agent, where the marginal energy surplus is 0, where the marginal energy return over investment is 1, where energy surplus has been maximized, and where also utility has been maximized. How much time do I have left?
About 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to have to rush through fast. Obviously, that steady state is not steady, because if you have efficiency breakthroughs, it's going to go down. If you have depletion, it's going to go up. Fossil fuels are constantly in this tension between efficiency, making the whole curve go down, and depletion making the whole curve go up. And there are an array of issues regarding not only efficiency, but stating the problem in terms of prime movers, dealing with non-energy goods, and minimizing energy transfers. but we ain't got time for that because our objective was to think about the proportionality between prices and embodied energy. And up to here, we don't have prices because we don't have markets. An autarkic agent does not face prices. So to introduce exchange, we have to think about this autarkic agent and put another one beside it and allow them to exchange. And following conventional economic rationale, we can define that there will be gains of trade that are specified as net increases in energy surplus derived from the lowering of embodied energy that specialization allows, right? Comparative and relative advantages lead agents to specialize in the goods for which they must transfer less energy to produce, and that frees up energy surplus to produce non-energy goods and increase unambiguously utility for both if the commodity price is between the reservation commodity price of both agents. And those are the limits, right? Now, although we can define the limits of the commodity price, that is the ratio at which two commodities will be exchanged, we can't define the specific number because the agents are both monopolies of the good they produce and monopsonies of the other one. So you have all these contingent situations that define what will be the specific commodity price. Nonetheless, if you allow competition, that is, bring in many agents just equal to A and B, well, you will eventually have a collapse of that range towards the minimum relative marginal embodied energy of both goods. And that will be the commodity price by simple tatonement, which is the process of iterative offerings and demands that lead to the collapse of range of commodity prices to the minimum relative marginal embodied energy of both. Now, this can be even generalized further to include many types of agents and many types of goods. And what we find is that following the same logic of Nash equilibrium tatonement, what we find is that for any good, the relevant marginal embodied energy is the marginal producer's marginal embodied energy. When you include a lot of producers, you have these market curves where different producers have different marginal embodied energy curves, right? And it's the marginal producer's marginal embodied energy that will define the commodity price for that good. And that's PC, right? Commodity price is equal to relative marginal embodied energy. Those are the gamma M's. We define this ratio as the rule of exchange, which tells us that agents exchange equivalent amounts of embodied energy at the margin, and that can be very relevant for equity issues, right? At the margin, and only at the margin do embodied energy exchanges equate. The second one is that this tells us that energy's lowest cost share in production can have nothing to do with energy's importance in the productive process. If you have a low-powered society and embodied energies are relatively low, the price of energy goods can be quite low, but that doesn't take into consideration that those same goods are providing all the energy surplus that allows for the whole economy to run. Now, coming to full circle, hopefully very fast, we know that commodity prices are very inconvenient. You don't want to buy a cow with bread or a house with fish, right? So in sufficiently sophisticated societies define general equivalents, which can be cows, but the cows for everything, right? Not to buy bread. Or gold, or cowries, or there are an array of historical examples of what is real money. The thing is, you define all goods in terms of this general equivalent. So you say, well, everything in terms of cows. So how much does a bread cost? Well, 1/100 of a cow. How much does a house cost? 5 cows. Well, so I know what a bread costs in terms of houses through cows. And that simplifies the exchange process dramatically. And that allows us to talk about real prices, which is the ratio between marginal embodied energy of a given good in terms of the marginal embodied energy of the general equivalent. Because, importantly, the general equivalent is a good that must be produced and thus has marginal embodied energy. That's the real price. And now, finishing up, real money is also inconvenient, right? Try to go buy a house with cows, or bread with, right, calories, or with lingots of gold. So more sophisticated economies define also a representation of this general equivalent. And then we come finally to the money that we are used to talking about. Euros, dollars, pesos, right? They are historically a representation of real money. So that was the gold standard back in the day. And you can define nominal money's purchasing power as applying the rule of exchange between real money and nominal money. So that gamma S is a synthetic embodied energy, which depends on that expression there. It depends on the marginal embodied energy of real money and the relative quantities of both type of money. So here's an expression for inflation, and to finish it up, what we find is that the representation of real price in terms of nominal money will be given by the equation up there, and if we take the ratio of those, we have that relative prices, nominal prices, dollars or euros, is going to be proportional to relative marginal embodied energy. I'm past my time, right?
Another half minute.
Okay, so fast highlights. The model follows conventional economic methodology in terms of being strictly adherent with marginal analysis. The novelty is focused on the proposal of an energy budget constraint as the determinant and constraint on the consumption possibilities of an autarkic agent. And that is based on revisiting the ideas of what goods are and the role of energy transfers and material rearrangements. Prime movers are central in this process, as they are the systems with which agents can transfer energy. And marginal energy surplus also is fundamental as it determines the long-term growth prospects of an agent. One nice thing that I love about this perspective is that it avoids the use of capital. All this, never talk about capital. I think capital is a highly undefined term that should be avoided in a more rigorous discussion about economics. And also allows the introduction of undetermined human behavior due to energy surplus. Well, the energetics dimension has a very strict dynamic, right? If you don't have energy in, you're not going to be able to reproduce the process over time. But what you do with energy surplus, that is totally undetermined. You can use it to build universities, space stations, or huge militaries. And that's where politics come in, and that's where undetermined human behavior comes in. That kind of connects with Prigoghine's idea, right? That when you have systems far away from thermal equilibrium, then is when freedom appears. The main result is that short-term growth is achieved by primary accumulation, but long-term growth is constrained by marginal energy surplus, or marginal EROI. There's no unique EROI, but a marginal EROI curve that depends on the level of production. Market prices are just a social representation with which we can relate to regarding embodied energy of goods, and relative market prices are proportional to relative marginal embodied energies. And I'm way out of time, so thank you.
You're not